Welcome to Deconstructing a Fairy Tale, embarrassingly in-depth thoughts about Disney movies from two Disney parents.
And fans.
I am your host, Jared.
And I'm Jill.
And today is special because we actually are joined by a guest host, Andrew Belcher, my brother. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
We're going to discuss Turning Red, the new Pixar film. And we thought reaching out to my brother was actually the perfect opportunity because Andrew's actually an animation student at MTSU studying, what would you call it, 3D animation?
Yeah, I would say 3D animation is my focus.
Okay, so give us your accolades. Tell us what you do, what your interest is in animation, what you know, all of it.
Okay, so basically my animation interests are in film. So like Pixar, Disney, I want to make 3D films. Any animations like Turning Red. So I have actually made a couple of short films. I'm only a freshman, so I don't have that much experience with the overall animation field, but I have lots of personal, interested, focused animation.
We're going to get to this, but Turning Red has some really interesting animation technical elements to it and stylistic choices that Andy will help us to explore. So let's dive into Turning Red. Before we go any further, though, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. We don't really know what we're going to be talking about with this episode, but there's a chance we're going to touch on some mature subjects. Just because this movie is about puberty, and so we want to be able to talk openly about some of those topics that the movie might be trying to address. This is just a warning for any kids that might be listening. This might be a more mature episode. It's a cartoon, but our subject today, it covers a lot. It covers a lot of adult themes. So that's our disclaimer. And of course, as always, spoilers. This movie just came out on Disney Plus as of the date of this recording. It's only 3 days old. So let's talk about Turning Red. Here's a quick overview. So in Turning Red, we're going to journey to Canada to meet Mei Lin Lee, a 13-year-old Chinese-Canadian student who one day discovers that whenever she gets too excited or too stressed, she turns into a giant red panda. But she can turn back if she becomes calm. This condition turns out to be linked to her ancestors who have a shared history with the species as a family curse, but the curse can be contained by performing a special ritual on one specific night, which to May's luck coincides with a concert of her favorite boy band. All of this, of course, as she deals with everything that puberty throws her way. So this movie just came out. It was made by Pixar, but it was released by Disney. And so we're going to talk today about not only the content of this movie, but of course, what is the meaning behind it? We think there's a lot of meaning here that we're going to dive into. We're going to start with where we always start with, and that's our fast facts. So Jill has, I think, the least number of fast facts today.
Yeah.
I think Andy and I have a lot. So Jill, why don't you go ahead and say one of yours?
Yeah, my fast fact.
Do you only have one?
I have one.
Okay. Let's hear it.
And I'm not even sure if it's correct, actually. But this
Love
is
the confidence.
the second Pixar film to be directed by a woman.
Oh.
The first one being Brave.
Really?
I have my fast fact is actually similar to yours, my first one, in that she was like the first solely directed by women. Because I also found the same thing.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
you're correct, Jill, in saying that, because that's something I found as well. So
Okay.
hopefully give you some more confidence about
Perfect.
that. Because
Thank
that's what
you.
I found
Yes,
as well.
it does.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good direction to go. We're going to talk a lot about the writer-director of this film. So we're going to talk a lot about the writer-director of this movie, Domi Shi. And a lot of our fast facts, I think, are related to Domi. She seems like an amazing woman. So my first fast fact is about her. She was rejected from the Pixar internship program in 2010. So as a college student, she applied for the Pixar internship program, was denied, kind of discouraged about that. And her dad, who was an art teacher in high school, said, you know what? You need to reapply. You need to try again this next year. I think it sounded like she didn't really want to. And so she did. She applied in 2011 and then was accepted as a storyboard intern. And so now, here we are, not that long after. 11 years later, she went from a storyboard intern to writer-director of a feature-length animation film. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
And I'm glad, and that's the kind of dad you want to be, right? who, hey, try again. I know you got rejected. Try again. Something good might come out of it.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. Like, that's such a persevering story. My fast fact is also about Domishi. She may also be known from directing a short film called Bao. A similar story to Turning Red, about a Chinese mother who wants a second chance at parenting, so one of her dumplings comes to life. It's an amazing little short film, but it's actually the first thing she directed for Pixar.
My next fact, also about Domishi. Her story development styles, like the way that she lands on a story and begins to craft it, is actually to start with the visuals. So, think about it. She's coming from the perspective of an artist. She's a storyboard artist, right? So she's actually worked on 5 or 6 Pixar films already as a storyboard artist. That's her like mindset, right? That's her mentality, is artwork. So she actually starts with the visual she wants to achieve. So like she might imagine, hey, it'd be really cool to have a shot of this giant red panda sitting on top of a roof looking at the Canadian skyline. And that's like the thing in her head. And then she goes, okay, how do we achieve that in the story? Which is really different than how most writers work. And most writers will tell you, it's story, like work out your characters, work out your plot. But her approach is actually the visuals, which speaks a lot to why this is maybe like some people might even call it a visual overload of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that, because actually my next fast fact is actually about the style. So the animation was inspired by anime, actually. So they were like trying to blend 2D, 3D styles together. So Domishi stated that she was inspired by Pokemon and Sailor Moon. And the anime style comes from inspiration she saw in her childhood. So the challenge with blending the styles can be that 2 dimensions is relatively to get lots of expressions and movement from a character, and it look natural, it look okay. But with 3 dimensions, that changes a lot. So, like, you can't get as much exaggeration out of it without it looking off or freaky. So it's a lot more difficult to translate that from 2D to 3D.
Yeah, because, I mean, you think about it, like, so much of 3D animation is about realism.
Yeah.
We watched Toy Story 4 the other day. It's amazing how real some of the shots in... Like, they look like they were actually filmed with a real camera, and they weren't animated at all. So imagine, trying to stretch, like, the character of Andy, making his face, like, contort and stretch when he's shocked. It would... Because he looks real, it would look... disgusting.
It would freak you out.
Be like, oh, right, it would freak you out. So, but in anime, it's like you're saying, it's 2D, so you can get away with that stuff, and people do it in 2D all the time. So that does explain why this movie looks more like Looney Tunes-esque, like cartoony, even though it's still in 3D, because they can then blend those 2 styles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I don't know if you even noticed, but I mean, it's pretty noticeable, but the characters' eyes, whenever they get excited about something, will actually grow and, like, sparkle whenever something happens. Yeah, which is such an anime thing to include. But it's really interesting nod to how they actually, like, do anime. So I thought that was a nice little detail.
It's also a good example of where Pixar is unique in that they really do let their artists drive the style of the films. So you're going to see, depending on which movie you're watching, it's going to seem visually very different because it's so reflective of the lead, story artist of that film, like what their preference is and what their styles are. And you don't get to see that expression from large corporations. Like, you don't even get to see that in Disney animation. Disney animation is traditional, like, in terms of, like, the style, they're pretty by the books. So it makes Pixar unique in a really cool way. My next fast fact is, okay, so we're going to talk about this band that's in the movie a lot, I think, today. 4Town. It is a boy band that drives quite a bit of the plot. They wrote real songs for this boy band in the movie that are so convincing. Like, Jill and I grew up in the 90s. Like, we both liked listening to these boy bands, and like, they sound like they came out of the late 90s, early 2000s in such a convincing way. But the songs for this boy band were written by none other than Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas O'Connell. Which, I mean, Billie and Phineas, incredible musicians, incredible artists, really prodigies, I would say, of our time. And the fact that they were able... Billie Eilish was born in 2001. So, like, this style of music predates her. And yet, it's so convincing, and Phineas actually voices one of the boys in the band. It's a pretty cool fact.
Wow, that is so impressive. And also, such a cool detail. I loved the whole music thing with them. I thought, I didn't grow up in that time. I'm a 2003 child, so I am only 19, so I haven't had the 90s boy band experience like everyone else has, but I've listened to my fair share of NSYNC, and that's really close to what NSYNC sounds like in my memory.
Totally. NSYNC, Boys to Men, Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees. It was sort of all of it mashed together. It was wild. My next fast fact is actually, it's about music again, but there's this ritual that the family does, the aunties and the grandmother perform. They draw a circle, and they have this song that they chant. I assumed that the song was in Mandarin because they're a Chinese family, and Mandarin is the most commonly spoken language in China. It's the song, the chant that they're singing was written just for this movie, and it's in Cantonese. So Cantonese by number of people, about 90 million people speak it, so that's like a lot of people. But by percentage of China, it's less than 1 in 10 people in China can speak Cantonese. It's more common in like southeastern China, so think like Hong Kong. But that gives us an indication of where the family is actually from, like what part of China they have immigrated from to Canada. And the Cantonese song is actually, it's like a real poem that was written specifically for this scene. They originally thought, we'll take an existing religious chant and we'll just put it in the movie and it'll be familiar to people. But they thought this is such a specific ceremony, trying to capture the red panda spirits is so like unique to this family. They deserve their own song. So they actually hired some employees of Disney from the Hong Kong area who spoke Cantonese to write the chant. And I don't speak Cantonese, but apparently it translates, and there have been quite a few people who've seen the movie and posted online like, oh my gosh, like this is it's so amazing because it's like real lyrics that actually apply to the scene, which is again, Pixar's all about those details. It's a cool little detail.
Yes, I love Pixar's attention to detail. They're so good at that. My next fast fact is also about their details, actually. So May, in panda form, had very short legs compared to her relatively large body. So this brought a unique animation challenge, as the fur and movement of the legs were like difficult to get right. Fur in animation is very meticulous, and it needs to be just right, because if it's done wrong, the animal will appear different than intended. Like, they'll be less believable, or they'll take you out of the immersion. They'll look, mangy. Their fur could be matted. Something could be off with it, and you just notice right away. So what they had to do is, rig the character, because rigging in animation is, similar to how you make a marionette. Like, if you have a puppet, you have the strings, you attach the strings to the puppet. That's what rigging is. You're just attaching, digital strings to a 3D model, which is just a digital puppet. So, when rigging the model for May in her panda form, they had to, figure out unique ways for the legs to bend correctly so that the fur could also move correctly, which is a very difficult and unique issue to this movie.
Yeah, I have 2 more fast facts. My next one is that Mei's color palette is red. So everything she wears is red. If you notice, her clothing, even before she becomes the panda, it's always, if it's not just totally red shirt and pants, it's red accents, she wears a red beanie a lot. And then, of course, she becomes the red panda, but it's always red. Her palette's always red. By contrast, her mom is always wearing emerald green. And so those are diametrically opposed colors. If you look at a color wheel, that's going to be colors separated by about 45 degrees, which means they're sort of at odds with each other. So Pixar's using a color palette to show that Mei and her mom are not in sync. They're not on the same page. They're actually a little bit opposed, which is, again, great little detail.
Yeah, that's a really cool detail.
Super cool.
I
Yeah.
like how all of the characters actually have a color associated with their like personalities.
Yeah.
Like one I thought about was Priya, where it's like a muted yellow and brown. And she's like the more
Yeah.
relaxed and easygoing of the rest of them. So it makes sense.
Yeah. I have one more fast fact. My last fast fact is more about the story, the plot. So Malin's goal is not to save the world or even to save herself. Her goal in this movie is to see a concert, which is one of the lowest stakes goals for any Pixar character ever that I can think of, which we'll get into this. I think was a really great choice because it's much more, that element is much more grounded in reality. Like what an 8th grade girl's actual goal is might be to see a boy band concert and not to, you know, save the world or save herself or save a loved one. That's, you know, that's more the space for fiction. And this was much more rooted in reality, that motivation.
I had not even thought about that, but that's really accurate. So my last fast fact, Pixar usually innovates some sort of technology for whatever movie they're working on. With certain movies like Nemo, they had to figure out fun ways to create like underwater scenes to make it look realistic and believable while also showing the characters and their colors in underwater environments. For Monsters, Inc., it was hair, because they had to figure out how to use hair on Sully, who is their most hairy character they ever used before. So they had to put millions of hairs on Sully by hand, which was a painful process, but they figured it out, and now they're really good at hair. So this Pixar movie introduced a new technology called inclusive technology. And this technology scans images inside the movie and makes sure that diversity is included in each frame. So that in the background, like, you can even see there's a kid with an insulin pump at one point, which I think is a really, really cool detail.
That's amazing. Yeah, and we should talk, we've touched on this with Raya. You know, part of the value in including diversity in all forms, like you're even saying, like having someone who has diabetes in the film, is so that kids particularly can see themselves in the movie. You know, they don't feel like the movie was made for somebody else. That they can watch a movie and go, oh yeah, that's like me. Oh my gosh, like I have an insulin pump. So that's really cool. I did not know that. That's an amazing fact. All right, let's talk about first impressions. I'm so excited. I'm looking at Jill. Andy and I have talked a lot. Jill, tell us about your first impressions.
Yeah, I wasn't really a fan. I went into it thinking, I'm not sure about this, but that's normally how I go into most Pixar films. Like, what is this even about?
A rat cooking, an old man in a balloon house? Like, what?
Coco, I was like, that's going to be bad, whatever.
Yeah.
So that didn't really mean much to me. But as the movie started, probably the first minute, I was like, I don't think this is going to be very good.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I felt. I did feel bad. I know people worked really hard on this. And I did enjoy that it was not this super sad, I need to cry and have a lot of feelings. I mean, it was still emotional and still had a lot of deep thoughts. We watched the behind the scenes and I felt like, okay, maybe I like it a little more.
Sure.
Yeah, my first impression, not good.
Not good. Andy, what about you?
Well, I went into it thinking that it would be okay, and I came out feeling justified for that.
Okay, it was okay.
Like, I think it had a really good energy and like a really cool environment. I liked the style of it. I think the characters were interesting, if not like super good. And I enjoyed the story for the most part, but there were just some things that I was just like, maybe not. So I thought it was okay.
I think what helped me going into it was from the trailer, you could tell this was going to be different. Like, this was going to be different than, like, maybe the formulaic Pixar film. So I think my expectations, I had internally modified those. It's going to be more like anime. It's going to be very colorful and probably a little bit wild. And it's going to be a little bit more dramatized, you know, especially with characters than I'm accustomed to. That really helped set the correct tone for myself because it really is stylistically different. Like, you anime is probably the best way to frame it. You get loud colors, very vibrant emotions on characters' faces. Like you talked about the twinkling eyes, the giant eyes and stuff like that. Or like when characters like get mad and scream, it sort of becomes like comic booky, and like the background like turns into shooting lines and stuff like that, or firework kind of designs. So it's stylistically very different. And I knew that from the trailer, and that helped me kind of reset my expectations. All that being said, though, I also agreed there were parts of the movie I really liked. And yet, it's not really my favorite. We watched it, and I was like, okay, that was good, but it's not really a movie I really want to rewatch. Like, maybe ever.
Yeah.
But certainly not the kind of movie you want to go back to again and again and again, as is the case for me with most Pixar films.
Yeah, I agree. I did not feel like I'm going to watch this a lot of times. Like, I will not be in my dorm room thinking, what movie should I watch today? And think of Turning Red. I will think of something else.
Watch Turning Red.
Yeah, it'll be something else. So, no, I agree.
Yeah. Well, and so I think part of that is, we'll get into this, my first impression also was like, this is clearly about puberty. Like, it is explicitly at times, so there's a moment when Mei first turns into the panda, and her mom is thinking that she's had her first period. And so the mom starts making, like, very, like, uncomfortable comments to Mei. And that's the point. Like, it's meant to be cringy, and for the, like, as the daughter, you're like, Mom, stop talking. Like, I do not want you to say these things to me. Like, that's the whole point. But the whole movie is about the awkwardness of puberty. So, like Jill mentioned, we watched the behind-the-scenes documentary that is really good. Disney made it. It's on Disney Plus now, where Domichi talks about how this whole thing for her was, how do I reframe puberty for a girl? An 8th grade girl, you suddenly get smelly, you get hairy, you feel ugly, you notice every flaw in yourself, you feel awkward, you're suddenly attracted to boys, you don't know what to do with that, you don't know why. It's an awkward time, and if you put that to film, it's gonna be cringy, it's gonna be awkward. So I kind of wondered, is it that I don't want to watch this, in part because that's an uncomfortable time, and it's an uncomfortable subject that, like, we all have gone through, and we do not care to revisit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it reminds us maybe too much of reality, and oftentimes we're looking to entertainment for an escape. We're looking to, like, leave some of those awkwardness in our actual lives behind, and this brings it up.
That's true.
Yeah, I did write, type out, like, maybe it's in fact too relatable, like, to handle. Like, maybe it's like, it also feels like, for me, it felt like the best version of something they would show in middle school health class. Like, this is what's gonna, like, whatever.
You're changing body.
You're changing body, or, like, your relationship with your parents and your friends. And so, like, it felt like that. So it's like, I usually these movies grow on me in time, and I don't know that this one will. Like I said, I can appreciate it, and I can appreciate the, like, it's different, and that's risky, and Pixar is good at the risks and the, like, doing things differently, and so I appreciate that, but it's like, I don't really want to watch this again, because
any more than I want to go back to middle school again.
Yeah. I would probably want to go back to middle school before I'm just kidding. Probably not, but
Wow.
No, it's true. I think that this is the first Disney movie to mention menstruation, right? Like, that in itself,
fast fact.
That should have been a fast fact. You're right. It should have been your fast fact. That in itself is uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about. It probably shouldn't be, but it is. And so I think, all the subjects this movie is intentionally trying to tackle, they're just awkward.
Yeah.
It's just uncomfortable.
And I think we might talk about this later, but this is not like a kids movie. This is like a preteen, teen movie. Preteen adult movie. Like, it's not like there are
if we had a 4-year-old, like, it's not.
Like, he might like the red panda part.
Right.
But, like, I don't want him to. I would not want. Like, if I have a teenager, I'm watching this with her, and then we're debriefing afterwards. Like,
you don't want any child to mimic sort of that behavior that you're seeing as a preteen on film. Yeah, that's right. No, so I think that's kind of like, that's a lot for our first impressions, but that's probably a good summary. Like, we had kind of a mixed bag. Like, Jill and I liked it, but also didn't like it. Like, we can appreciate it, but we're good not seeing it again, not revisiting it, and probably not one for the kids. So let's talk about what you guys liked about the movie. Let's start with some positives. What did you like about this movie? Jill, you have to go first.
Everything to do with Four Town. That made the movie, like, if that wasn't in the movie, I would be like, this, like, music, the part where they're at the concert, I mean, it's spot on. It's basically in sync. So I loved that. I love that both the parents are involved.
No parents are dead.
Yeah. And the friends are fun. I love the inclusion of the Tamagotchi.
Oh, yeah. Did you have a Tamagotchi?
I did. But it was like first grade. They were like outlawed at our school eventually. So that would not have been 2002, but...
Yeah, I had a Tamagotchi that was, get this, a Toy Story themed Tamagotchi from Toys R Us.
I wish
you can't get much more 90s than that. So here's one of the things I liked about this movie. I just liked that it was different. Jill and I were talking about, we have this pop-up book at our house of like all these different Pixar movies, and like you turn the spread and it'll have 4 Pixar movies on one spread where they have a pop-up for the movie, and it takes you through the decades or through the years. And there's like one spread you get to, and it's like all 4 movies on the spread are awful, right? It's like Cars 2,
Monsters
University, The Good Dinosaur, and you're like, oh, the
what
Dark
happened
Ages.
Here?
Yeah. And like, it really does feel like since Disney acquired Pixar, the number of original stories that have been allowed to come to the surface and actually get released has been so few. There have been so many sequels and prequels and spin-offs. And we're about to get Lightyear, which I think will probably be a good movie, but again, not an original idea. Like, it's a spin-off from Toy Story. So it's nice to see something that's original. I just really was glad, like, this is a new story. And we'll talk about this in a second. It is derivative. I think it's very derivative of Pixar's own work. But the context was unique, the characters are unique, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. I like the uniqueness of it. It's nice, it's refreshing to have, like, a new thing come out. Because I feel like most things now are just sequels of other things. Even not just within Pixar, but just movies in general. I feel like it's just sequels.
Marvel, yeah.
So it's nice to have an original story.
I mean, I think as much as this movie is about a teenager going through puberty, it's also about parents who have a teenager going through puberty. And I loved that. I love that it, like, showed that parenting is messy, that is really hard to parent, and no one really knows what they're doing. Especially, like, at first, you know, Mei's an only child. It's Ming and Jin's first time going through this, and they don't really know what they're doing. And you can see how scared Ming is. Like, she's so scared she's going to mess up her daughter. She's so scared that her mom, Ming's mom, parented her perfectly, and what if I don't parent in the same way? What if I mess up my daughter even though my mom didn't mess up me? And so there's this pressure that even Ming is feeling, and it's so relatable. Like, we have a 2-year-old and a infant, so like this like teenage narrative is really distant for us, and yet already we recognize every day how daunting parenting is. And like with a toddler, they're basically just like the first version of a teenager, right? Throwing tantrums all the time, always going their own way, very stubborn, going through a lot of changes, and we're constantly like, what do we do? And it's messy. And so I really appreciated just the honesty of that. And as a parent, I could imagine, especially we're talking about like parents that we know who have teenagers, I think watching this would be humorous to you, because you'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, I know exactly what this feels like. I relate so hard to this. So I love that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I did also like when her dad, like, sits down and talks with her. It's like, has your mom talked to you about her panda? You know, like...
Yeah.
I thought that was sweet.
Yeah.
I liked the ending when May sees her mom in like the spirit realm or wherever that is.
Yeah.
And the mom's young and she seems so unsure of herself, and like I think that's really cool and a really interesting detail to add, like how her whole life she's had no idea like who she is, I guess, or like she wants to be just perfect. And that strive for perfection has driven her to want perfection within herself, but also within her family. And I think that's really cool that like it shows her through the years as she's trying to be the perfect child. So I like that moment. It was the closest moment to making me cry. So like almost got there, not quite, but it was still a nice like little moment they included.
Yeah, and I love that Ming, when she's the teenager in the spirit world, that she's saying the same things that Mei Mei was saying. Like, my mom doesn't get it. Like, I'm trying so hard to be perfect, and I want to be my own person, but she doesn't listen. She doesn't care. It's like the same stuff that Mei Mei is saying, which, again, painfully relatable, right? You're like, yes, I know exactly what that's like. But how beautiful it is when you're able to see your parent in that empathetic light, and you're like, oh, you're not the villain. Actually, you're a lot more like me than I realized. And that, what we're seeing there is like empathy at work, and they're using this, metaphor of the spirit world to achieve that. I really like that too.
Yeah, I like that was good. And I agree with you, Andy, the friends, like, when they're like, oh, cool, you're a red panda, whatever. Like, like it was...
Unfazed.
Yeah. And so, I like that. I thought those were my moments.
All right, favorite character. Do you guys have a favorite character? Jill, you first.
My favorite character are the Four Town Band.
The Four Town Band, which there are 5 of them.
Yeah.
Which I love.
I just thought they're really funny.
Yeah.
And I liked them a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the friends, I don't know. But I just felt like I liked the Four Town the best.
Yeah.
Also I kind of liked, what's his name, Tyler.
Tyler? I did too. Yeah, he was like presented to this bully, but you kind of felt for him.
Yeah.
I think I've already said mine. Mine's Jin, her dad. I also love that he cooks for the family. Like, there's that scene. It's like a very dramatic slow motion up close scene with the food.
Oh yeah, that was a really good
Makes
scene.
it like look like he's like this epic chef.
Yeah.
And then he like wipes his glasses. I just thought that was cool.
Yeah, that was.
It's like such a
good.
dad kind of moment.
I couldn't decide for my favorite character. I was in between Miriam and Jin.
Yeah.
Completely different, complete opposites, really. Because one's energetic and crazy, and one's like quiet but supportive. But I think I'm leaning more towards Jin than Miriam. More because I think he had more of a positive impact on May's life. Instead of like telling her to rebel, he's like, I will love you in any way. So like, I think that gives her less cause to rebel, so then it makes it a lot better, like healthy for her mentally. So yeah, I like Jin a lot more, I think.
All right, so I have a question for you guys. What concert would you risk turning into a red panda to go to? You have to pick one. You can't say none. You have to pick a concert that you're like, I would risk turning into a giant red panda for them.
That's a hard one.
That is hard, because part of my thing with this movie is like, is this really worth it? But it's like, you have to think about an 8th grade girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's such a hard question. I think I might say Need to Breathe. I don't know. That's just the first one that came in my head. So, like, I don't know for sure.
I'd say Coldplay.
Ooh.
I still haven't seen Coldplay. I really, really want to. And I'm running out of time. I'm not sure how much longer they're going to be a band. They've been a band forever.
For a very long
time. Like, since I was born.
Yeah.
I probably would be more entitled to something if it was like a musical.
Oh, yeah. Okay, pick a musical.
Instead.
Hamilton?
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Maybe Hamilton.
Nice. It's a good choice.
Hamilton's good.
I would say NSYNC, but I've been to 4 of their concerts.
Wow. You did relate too hard to this movie.
If NSYNC had a reunion tour, done. That's my answer. with all 5 of them.
All right, let's actually shift things a little bit. Let's talk about what we didn't like in the movie, because I think we're going to spend some time here. Jill, you did not like this movie. And there was a lot about it you don't like.
Yeah.
Give me the details. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I know. Here's what's hard. I know that the parents are, like, thinking they're doing the best for her. But I'm just like, why put her in... She's just found out she turns into a red panda when she's upset.
Yeah.
And you take away everything in her room except a bed. And so now she's alone in this empty bedroom.
Yeah.
Like, no. God, no. Which, again, that's, like, probably not against the movie. That's probably just more of, like, that's how it would be. And so I probably am casting, like, frustrations with the parents on the movie when, in reality, this is reality and the movie's just portraying that.
So you're really critiquing parenting choices.
Right, yeah. So I think that's where I'm maybe, like, not a fair evaluation for the movie.
Right. It's like Frozen. We watched Frozen the other day because it snowed here.
Yeah.
And it's like the parents in Frozen, it's like you do not teach any parenting classes.
Yeah.
Like you guys are not good at
Elsa
this.
in her room and are like, conceal, don't feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
And they're like, Elsa, what did you do?
Yeah.
It's like, no,
what have you
this
done?
is not good.
Okay.
So it's a common Disney thing, right?
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, I know I'm going to make a lot of mistakes as a mom. So there's that. The whole, like, I get to do whatever I want because I'm 13 and I can decide whatever. Mm-hmm. That just feels like really an entitled thing. And it feels like it's not really talking about a red panda, it's talking more about, like, I'm going to do whatever I want and you need to accept me.
I would say, like, one of the things for me is it's pretty derivative from other Pixar films. If you think about the different elements of this movie, her breaking away from her parents, being disobedient to her parents at some points and hiding things about herself from her parents so that she can be her own person, I think that was done better in Luca. Like, that's what Luca is, and I think it was done actually better with that movie. If you think about, like, the relationship tension between her and her mom, I think that was done better in Brave between Merida and her mom, the queen, and then having an overprotective parent. I think that was way better in Finding Nemo, with Marlin being overprotective of Nemo, because you understood early on in Finding Nemo, for example, why Marlin was the way that he was, and it was done in such a, like, realistic way. Like, so there's a moment in Turning Red when Ming is watching Mei Mei through the window at the school classroom, like, with binoculars, hiding behind a tree, and, like, she kicks the security guard, which feels so out of character for a woman who tries to be perfect, that she would kick a security guard who's being very reasonable with her. And then she, like, from outside is like, I brought your maxi pads. Like, what, the window is closed. What did you how are you going to get those to her? Like, it was, like, very cartoony to me in those moments where they were trying to show, look how overprotective this mom is, whereas, like, Marlin is like, hey, I'd actually feel better if you didn't go play with those kids who are your age. I'd rather you go play in the toddler area. That's, like, very relatable. Like, that's, like, parents, how helicopter parents actually are. So, again, I just thought, like, so much of this movie, the elements that were pretty good were just done better in other Pixar movies.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think for me, I didn't really feel, like, super invested in the climax that much. Like, the most important part of the film, I didn't feel that invested in. Part of that might be because I can't really relate to anything that's happening in the movie. Like, it's not for me, so I'm not, like, as invested in what happens in the end, I guess.
And I think that was part of, when we watched the documentary with Domi Shi, she was talking about the complications for an immigrant family when you move to somewhere and, like, your family expects you to hold on tightly to your traditions and your culture that you came from, but you're so excited and, like, you're growing up in this new culture that you really like. So Domi Shi, like, this, I mean, hopefully you know this, like, this is her story in large part, not the Red Panda part, but like everything else. This was her experience growing up in Canada, coming from a Chinese family and working in the temple, all of that. And her, she shared, my mom was really frustrated that I was embracing so much of this Western North American culture, and that she really wanted me to be more Chinese. And that tension between immigrant families, particularly with kids, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's not one that we relate to. Right. It's not an experience that we've had. But like, that's great. It's great that like this is maybe for other people in that regard. Yeah. I really liked the metaphor of the red panda serving as a really interesting metaphor for puberty, but there were moments for me where it stepped into problematic territory. Like spaces where I was not super excited. Like, this is maybe not okay.
Yeah.
Or at least it's not the way that I would want to present, So like one of those, for example, was I think a lot of it was standing in for sexual freedom for a teenager, which, I mean, people will debate that, right? Like we can have a debate about what's good, what's bad, all of that. But there were moments where it felt like it was getting into like exploit territory. Mm-hmm. So like she is selling photos of herself to like boys in the school to make money for this concert. And I don't know what that metaphor is supposed to match to that's anything that's positive. Like if a girl were selling photos of her body to boys in a school, like I think most people would condemn that pretty quickly. Like, that's creepy, that's like these boys taking advantage of this girl. I don't know. And so, like, that was not, there were moments like that where the metaphor for me started to get into territory I thought was unhealthy.
I felt that way too. Like, okay, this is about puberty, but it's really like other stuff. And that's where I was like, I don't know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the picture thing.
There's like this moment of like you kind of see like a sexual awakening in her when she's under the bed drawing the sexy pictures, she calls them, of the weird merman, and it's a little uncomfortable to watch. And it's clearly filmed to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But again, it's like this is a cartoon.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a kids movie.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's like those things were not like, this is not enjoyable to watch. This is strange to me. Maybe, I don't know. I never did that.
You never drew shirtless mermen?
I didn't. It's weird, I know, but...
To me, that felt like closer to a metaphor for like pornography.
Yeah.
Which again, okay, 8th grader, like that is the experience. Yes. Yeah. But not something I like really wanted to watch a movie about.
Yeah. Right. And that's where it's like, this is again, like why would I watch this again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are movies to like challenge you. Like I'm certainly for challenging movies, but I don't want that in a kids film. Like I don't want to watch a kids film and have like a metaphor about child pornography or like child going through pornography. Like that's a part where I just get uncomfortable with. I'm like, this is not okay. I don't like this.
There's a couple moments where like she can't control like the fact that she's like excited like by these boys that she's attracted to. Mm-hmm. And like because she's in the panda form, it's just like all her emotions are like on display, and it's a little uncomfortable like to watch. Like her seeing the guy like in the deli mart or whatever, stuff like that, where it's like you've said, this is maybe internally an experience of any 8th grader, but I don't really want to watch a movie like highlighting those features. There's a line like at the end that's like my panda, my choice, which is really sort of that championing like I get to do what I want with my body when I want to. Which is both like a nod to, I would say, like pro-choice views on like women's health and abortion, but then also just sex in general. And this is a 13-year-old. Yeah. So
again, a health class movie in middle school.
Right. I kind of like have my hands thrown up about this movie because I was talking to Jill last night. I think a lot of the things that I don't like about the metaphor, I am bringing in my interpretation. Because the movie itself, okay, for example, the movie does not have pornography in it. Like, let's just be really clear.
Right.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It does not talk about sex. The closest it gets to is acknowledging that girls have periods, which is like, that's just a fact of life.
Right.
We shouldn't be that uncomfortable by that. It's just a fact. But the interpretation we bring really does matter. I think if our toddler son watched this movie, it would be fine. Like, there are things that behaviors he might pick up about how she relates to her parents that I wouldn't love. Like, that's the part I would be like, hey, no, that's not okay. But it really comes with like experience and interpretation, where you start to get into, I would consider like more complicated territory and less entertainment, like you're saying, more health class video type of content. Where, again, if I'm going to watch this with our daughter, we're watching it together, and we're maybe going to, like, talk about it a little bit afterwards.
It's open-ended enough to be like, were they saying this? Is that, are we interpreting it this way? When really maybe they didn't mean that at all.
Yeah.
But it's hard to not be like, well, no.
Well, and I want to acknowledge, like, on the front end, again, not having a teenager, that I imagine the line between letting your teenager make decisions for themselves
I can't imagine.
and you setting expectations for, like, what they can and cannot do has got to be impossible to figure out how you make those decisions. Like, I watched our parents struggle with us to figure that out. I know we're going to struggle figuring that out. It seems like an impossible ask.
Right, yeah.
So I get that, but then the movie seemed like at the very end, it just quickly landed on, like Maymay says, I have responsibilities. As long as I do those at home, I can do whatever I want.
Right, yeah.
And that is a very particular, like, place for parents to land that not everyone will or should land there.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to land there. That's 11 years away, but I do not expect us to land in that same spot. So that to me just was like, I don't know. It was weird. I didn't like it.
Yeah, just like complex messaging there.
Yeah, and it did feel like it was sort of telling you exactly how, like, a parent should relate to the teenager. And out of the two who needed to change, it was saying the parent was the only one who needed to change.
Yeah.
Oh, and that kind of reminds me, going back to the derivative thing, this does touch so much on generational trauma, which I think was done way better in Encanto.
Oh, yeah.
So much better.
Yeah.
Because they explored it. They actually, like, fleshed it out and, like, went through, like, Mirabelle and then her mom and aunts and then, or uncle and aunts, and then her grandmother.
Yeah.
You really got to dig into it. So, again, it was just done better in another movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jared brought up a good point. We were talking, like, if you're gonna have a movie about an 8th grade girl, this is a great way to portray it.
Turning into a red panda.
Yeah. It's just a weird subject to pick. Like, you know, it's a, like...
Yeah.
And also, to me, it felt like a worse version of Inside Out.
Well, so when Andy and I were at SALT, Pete Docter was the one who wrote and directed Inside Out, and Pete Docter was talking about, you know, people have asked him if he would ever make a sequel, and he's like, well, Riley was about to be a teenager, so probably not. We don't want to see that sequel of Inside Out.
It feels
it's going to be uncomfortable.
This is like a fun movie, but we've picked this weird subject.
So we've gone off a lot on all of that interpretation stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Andy, was there anything else that you didn't like about this movie?
I think for me, it just kind of felt scattered. Like... the movie did, and that's like one of the main things I didn't like about it, besides the weird messaging interpretation thing, was just the feeling of it being scattered, like not a complete thought to me. So that's one thing I just was like, oh, this kind of feels off and like an afterthought kind of movie.
All right, so lingering questions. Let's talk about lingering questions. Did you guys have any for this movie?
No.
I had a question. Why was Ming so large? And why are the pandas different sizes?
Yeah,
That's a great
That's
question.
a great
That's
question.
a really good question.
I feel like that should be explored.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I thought they'd be all the same size. That's my assumption. And then when her dad was like, she was huge, I thought he meant like just the same size. But no.
Right.
I was
Also,
wrong.
red pandas are small, but
My lingering question is, what now? Mei Mei chooses to become the red panda, like, permanently.
yeah.
Now what? Because to me, like, what feels like was going to happen, let's think about the timeline. It's 2002. She's 13, it's 2002. So we're about to get social media. We're about to get YouTube. This girl's about to have her life wrecked by international fame. She's about to become basically a teen celebrity because she can turn into this red panda. And she clearly is comfortable, like, using that to make money. So I was thinking about all the Disney Channel original stars whose lives have been wrecked by being a part of Disney Channel. I was like, that's about to be her path. We're about to watch her go down the child star
Yeah.
path. That feels inevitable to me for the timeline.
Yeah.
Yes, I was like, what happens now? And I guess that's why you end the movie there. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why.
Someone did ask
was over.
Domichi recently if she would do a Turning Red 2, which I was like, no.
Hope
No one
not.
needs that.
No.
And she was like, maybe. And I was like,
Ugh,
no.
Yikes.
Do something else. Like,
Yeah.
let's leave this story and go find another one. I want to, before we go to our rating, I do want to say this movie has gotten some interesting feedback, some interesting reception. It's only been out for 3 days now, but critically, this movie is a huge success. Like, it has a 95 on Rotten Tomatoes. That score is computed from, like, verified movie critics. So these are, like, the people who, like, they know movies. And in that group, this movie is excelled. But the audience score for this movie is 69, which is by far the biggest discrepancy between what the critics thought and what the average person thought in any Pixar movie. I clicked through every single one of them, and all of them are within 10 points of each other, and this one's about 30 points different.
Wow.
So, I mean, I do think that's interesting. It makes me think that the way that this movie took risks, the way that it was kind of risque, really appealed to the, like, critic crowd, but has not landed quite as well on just the everyday crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would not even say the everyday crowd. I would say, like, the Disney Pixar crowd.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause,
right.
like,
That's a good point.
it's soon. It's close. So, like, if you're watching this, you're probably a Disney or Pixar fan. I mean,
Yeah.
I texted some of my friends, and they're like, "Wait, it just came out. We haven't watched it."
Yeah.
You know, like, where we were like, Friday night, we gotta watch it.
Let's get to our rating. We had a tricky time rating this movie. I will say, Andy did not get input on what we rated the movie, so I'm curious, Andy, to see if you would say the same thing. Jill and I rated this movie Wait for Disney Plus, which is
Medium.
which is about medium. It's about a C. It's about a C grade.
Yeah.
Wait for Disney Plus. Now, we would have lowered it, but our next rating down is Babysitter Movie, which
And
means...
I do not want my children watching this with a babysitter.
Yeah, that's right. The Babysitter Movie is like the movie that the babysitter just turns on to placate the children
Yeah.
while the parents are gone, and this is like
This
not
is
that.
not that.
Yeah.
But I also, I don't want to lock it in the vault. That's her lowest rating.
Yeah. It's not garbage.
So by default,
Yeah, it's decent.
it gets a C. It's fine.
yeah,
I completely agree.
It goes... Okay, good.
Good.
Andy's in agreement.
Disney Plus.
Wait for Disney Plus.
Which we did.
Which
Which
we
it's
did.
like, we watched it and I was like, yeah, it was a good call just to put this out there on Disney Plus. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I feel the same way. I was really sad for all the artists who worked on this movie
Yeah.
when it was announced it was not going to go to theater, as they had previously said, but it was only going to be on Disney Plus, and it wasn't even going to be Premier Access, meaning everyone could watch it for free. I just felt sad for Pixar because this is the third movie that this has happened to. We'll see what happens with Lightyear here in the summer, but then we watched it, and I was like, that was probably the right
That's a good
call
call.
because... Again, critically, it's doing great, But I don't think audiences are gonna love this movie. I don't think that if they had put it in theater that it would have done very well. Like, subtract COVID and the pandemic, I just don't think it would have done very well in the box office. And that by itself would have tarnished Pixar's reputation as being this excellent studio. So I think from like a business and marketing perspective,
Yeah.
it was the right call, guys.
I mean, it
and I hate
absolutely
that.
makes sense. Because also, like, the box office in general is not doing well right now just because of COVID.
No.
And, like, it was already on the decline before COVID happened, but then COVID happened, and then the box office just started going down and down and down. And now you're Disney, and you have this new Pixar movie coming out, and you're like, it's not going to be very good. Do I release it to theaters or to Disney Plus? And the smart move is the one they made, which is just to Disney Plus. Like, that was just the way to go.
I really hope that Pixar returns to the theater. I hope that Lightyear goes to theater. Disney has said that they have 3 more Pixar films in production right now. One will come out next June, so we do have to wait a little over a year. We'll have Lightyear in June, and then we'll have
Another one in June.
another June the next year.
And then a March and a June.
And then a March and a June. So we got some more movies coming down. We don't know what those are. We're hoping they're originals. We don't know. And I mean, I don't know. There's a risk that they're all going to be streaming. I've seen online Screen Rant posted an article saying that they thought that Disney was turning Pixar into a Disney Plus content house. And
That's upsetting.
makes me so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. But in order to get to that
Prefer
box
they did that with
office,
Disney Animation.
I know. In order to get to the box office, though, it's got to be exceptional for audiences. It's and so Turning Red, I don't think it's that.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
But I will say though, all that said, I think Domishi is a genius.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
she's
I
so
think she's
talented.
great.
Absolutely.
The short film she did, I can't even watch without.
I know.
Yeah, if you haven't seen
Like-
Bao, it's also free on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's
Yeah.
way too much.
Yourself.
It's so good, but
Well,
also so touching.
and
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And again, props to Disney Pixar. Like, so the process of how this movie even got greenlit was Domishi, storyboard artist. Then she has this idea for Bao, this short film. She does not have a lot of time to work on it, so it actually took 2 years, 3 years to make. It's the longest that any of their short films have taken, just because she didn't have time to make it. And then when she got it finished, and the Pixar execs, the Disney execs, they saw it first, they were like, oh my gosh, like, we want to give you a feature-length film and see what you could do with that. And they asked her, bring us your top 3 ideas. And so all of her ideas were related to puberty and like going through that time. And so they, kind of landed on the Red Panda idea. But, there aren't many places when you're in a multi-billion-dollar company where you have a 26-year-old who, has had one idea and you go, you know what do you want? Ask for it and I will give it to you. I'm going to give you the platform to make what you want to make. She's, I think, 31, 32 now. So, extraordinarily talented. It's really cool that she's been giving this opportunity. And I hope to see more of those kinds of artists given the chance to make these films. But, this just wasn't the film for us.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
wasn't.
Andy, thanks for joining us today.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
of course.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having me. It was an honor.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have you on an episode again soon.
Yes.
We'll see you for Lightyear, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's true. That'll be a good one. Hopefully. We'll see.
Great.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully.